Thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. So with that, I'm the last speaker of the evening here, and just have a few slides shorter than my normal policy presentation. Through that, just wanted to highlight just mainly one thing on the market development side of Kansas corn, and then also talk a little bit about some policy level things there. This graph of Kansas corn's been cost sharing with fuel retailers across the state since 2016 was the first year, continuing to see really impressive growth in ethanol sales from there. This is just the last 2 years of data, 21 and 22 through there. It's actually interesting if 2020 would have been on this. We actually saw smaller growth, but we did see growth in ethanol sales in 2020, despite overall fuel demand being down 25%. You can kind of notice the summer driving season month. That'll be something to pay attention to when I talk about E15 later on in this presentation, how fuel demand does peak during those seasons. But if you look kind of May 21, May 20 to May 22, and that we're seeing consistent growth through all those. What's also interesting we're seeing is the fuel type that consumers are buying predominantly. So you look at 2020, that's the pie chart to the left, roughly almost 41% of the fuel sold at these stations was still the typical, E10, which is what, is available, everywhere in the nation through that. And saw E15 was at like 15.5%, but pay special attention there to E30. It was at 33%. Fast forward that to what we saw in 2022, we were actually up to 47% of the fuel volume at these stations that we partner with was E30. This is due in large part, there's a brand of stations in the Wichita area. They're also in McPherson, Newton, and kind of some areas down south there. It's the Jumpstart stores. They've been really good at marketing kind of super premium unleaded, which is an E30 product, and are getting really good response from consumers, all the way from those that are very price conscious to a lot of the higher end vehicles that say that premium fuel, premium unleaded only on the gas cap, if you will. And so great success story there. Switching gears to the policy side, I think kind of what's first and foremost in a lot of our minds and ag groups is, we do have a farm bill that expires this year. And so what needs to happen is a new farm bill either needs to be passed or an extension does, or else if the farm bill is allowed to expire, we really revert back to some outdated policies that date back as far as the 1930s there. Ag groups are, releasing priorities. There's starting to be farm bill hearings on the Senate side and farm bill listening sessions scheduled by, members of Congress there. What I'm, hearing first and foremost and pretty consistent with other groups is really protect that current crop insurance system of current in all caps, not messing with payment levels, percentages there, and especially no additional onerous restrictions on, specifying certain practices that need to be there. Also seeing a move to increase in foreign market development funding. Those programs have stayed constant over the last 10 years. And so just due to inflation, that has dropped down. That's a lot of trade associations take advantage of that. The data is really clear about developing these relationships across the country. Our primary groups we work with through the U.S. Grains Council, as well as the U.S. Meat Export Federation, and even the U.S. Poultry and Egg Export Council, and seeing great returns on those relationships. And then some slight changes to the commodity titles, ARC, PLC, but nothing through there. I'm also starting to hear that, even though we're just in the beginning of February, that maybe there won't be time for a new farm bill this year, which would mean an extension on to next year by a year or so, which, where we sit now with current crop insurance, and that probably wouldn't be the worst thing there. The other big thing in the corn world that we're continuing to follow is in less than a year, there is a U.S.-Mexican decree. Think of that as similar to an executive order out of the U.S., and that would ban the GMO corn imports. It's been very unclear how they would go about this and what all qualifies through that, but just some numbers to throw out there is Mexico imports about, like the last few years from the U.S. alone, 670 million bushels. I hear people I talk to in the trade in that saying they would probably struggle to find 40 million bushels of non-GMO corn to import, which could have very adverse impacts on their feed, their livestock industry, but probably just as big as could really spike. The tortilla is a staple of the Mexican diet, and with the shortages of that, with large price increases and cost of food, could actually cause quite some civil unrest. Starting to see a little more action out of the Biden administration on that. In talks through that. We'll give props to our Kansas congressional delegation's been helpful in communication with the administration as far as that this needs to be more front and centered. We've seen recent talks, it's been thrown around that maybe exempt feed corn from this decree, but keep that for food grade corn. And, we're just not in a position to, give at that level now, because this is based on, as we know, a very non-scientific basis. And, even other ag industries besides the corn industry have even, encouraged us to hold on, because this could be a slippery slope if this is allowed to take effect without that it could push, for instance, to the dairy industry or that. On the ethanol side, it's kind of the tale of two things there. We're seeing great ethanol sales out there, but the policy realm hasn't been the best. E15 in 2019, it was made, the Trump administration set a rule through the EPA that allowed for the year-round sale of E15. And by default, E15 is not permitted in the summer driving season months, which is, the most heavily demanded of the year. And unfortunately, that rule in summer of 2021 was overturned by the Supreme Court. It had nothing to do with the fuel itself or environmental impacts, because, quite frankly, we have the data is there that show positive environmental impacts with E15. But it was more on the rule was overturned with the methods in which the rule was made, kind of the typical bureaucratic. So that being said, really what we see is the best long-term solution to allow for the sale of E15 year-round is to fix this legislatively. At the end of 2022, there was legislation proposed, really simple legislation. Was happy to have both of our U.S. Senators, Marshall and Moran, on this bill, as well as 3 out of our 4 members on the House side. Fortunately, it didn't make it in, kind of the final cut, ran out of floor time, but looking at how to get that in 2023. Another kind of belt and suspenders approach to this is the Clean Air Act does allow for a state to opt out of certain provisions, and in this case, to opt out of the provisions that prevent the year-round sale of E15. Last summer, towards the beginning of the summer, we were really happy. The Governor Kelly was included amongst a list of 8 Midwestern governors that sent a notice to EPA that they were going to opt out. And unfortunately, towards the end of the summer, Governor Kelly removed us from that list with the kind of the reasoning be that it could create difficulties for fuel distributors and other entities in the Kansas City area, where since Missouri wasn't originally on wasn't on the original list of states. But kind of right before Christmas time, Missouri decided to get on as a state, and so they're working through that method there. And so we're working really hard, the corn, the ethanol industries in that, to get the governor to uphold her word and get Kansas back on a list of states, which would at least allow it for sale going forward in the state of Kansas, even though we're a small state, small population. regulations. So it would be much better if that was allowed for there. And just 4 other issues there. I think really the theme of engagement with the federal government for sure is really following the science. We see on atrazine, Sarah mentioned before, and my boss, our Kansas Corn CEO, Greg Krisick, is chairman of the Trizine Network that has done a lot of work over many years with the companies, with agencies, and that mainly the EPA. We'll say that, due to some really good, strong grassroots work, and, I know there's probably some of you on this Zoom right now that submitted comments as part of our call to action we had last summer. And what has came out of that is EPA is committed to hosting an objective scientific advisory panel, or SAP, and to really look at the science behind the aquatic level set, and then also look at the validity of the models that are there. Down the list, waters of the U.S., new definitions been proposed, despite the old rule being currently still in the courts. So it's interesting the timing of that. On the lesser prairie chicken, especially out west, can be a big issue. We do see that a lot of the farming practices in these impacted areas are exempt from the regulation, but there's a lot of uncertainty in the livestock industry. And at the end of the day, the science is, if you just look over time, I remember been working with this prairie chicken issue for over 10 years now. If you look at those populations, follow the precipitation levels. So when there's less precipitation, there's going to be lower populations of those birds. And then others, we'll just keep our eyes on that. Just one slide here on the state legislature has been going on for just about a month now. Legislation on the ag levels, probably been mainly focused around water, and namely on the House has a water committee. It's under new leadership. Representative Minix from Scott City done a great job of having some great overviews, getting committee members up to speed, and really looking at discussions picking up where they left off last session, looking at additional funding streams to fund the state water plan that could have great benefits for not only Western Kansas, the possibility of additional cost share for irrigation technologies, but also on water quality issues on the eastern part of the state around the reservoirs. I just think overall, in the State House and around, needs to be increased education and outreach. And I've done a lot of work with the Department of Ag and Water Office this session and prior to this session about, they've got some good data, making sure it's getting into the right hands. And then the last slide's just really the whole key. There's no one size fits all approach. Sometimes in Topeka, they tend to want to pass a bill that has a simple set of rules in it and applies to the whole state. And there's just so much diversity across the state, even across irrigation. On my farm where I irrigate in north central Kansas, it's a lot different than southwest Kansas or east central Kansas through there. So we'll just want to mention, if you want a good outlet to keep up with these issues as they especially relate to corn, we'd welcome your membership in the Kansas Corn Growers Association. If you want to keep up with these issues, or as I also like to say, if you don't want to keep up with these issues but know someone else is working on your behalf, please join the association there. We have two great, I got the contact information up here for Kylie and Nikki. They're two of our grower services field staff members that are just great resources for you to reach out with any issues that come up on your operation, ideas you have. You can always reach out directly to me, but these two are really good one-stop. Kylie covers the eastern part of the state, and Nikki covers the western part of the state. So that is the last of my slides. Let me see what the chat's through that. Doesn't look like there was any direct questions. And how are we doing? We're just a few minutes over time with 5 presenters. I think we're doing good. Would just like to thank everyone again for joining us tonight. I want to know, please look in the coming days. We'll send out a survey. It's really good to get feedback of what you want to see done, and some anonymous questions that we ask about your operation. Some great data that Ignacio and his team utilizes through there. And this session will also be recorded, and then we'll get presentations up online and keep going from there. But again, thanks everyone for your attention and all that you do. And we will have a safe planning season and look forward to talking to everyone soon.